The throne room looked like something out of a nightmare. Huge crystal pillars rose up into dark, which was so thick that you couldn't see where they ended. There were thousands of alien creatures in space, and their hard, shell-like bodies made clicking sounds as they got closer to watch. The air smelled bad, like metal, and something else Jake couldn't put his finger on. Jake Miller moved forward, dragging his chains on the shiny floor. His prison clothes were torn and stained from 2 months of living in a cell that was barely big enough for him to lie down in. It seemed like a long time ago that he was flying his fighter jet to protect the human colonies on the outer rim. These creatures were just making fun of him now. The eternal crown hovered over the empty throne, as if it were alive. It looked like a ring of pure silver light that was beating like a heart. Jake had been standing in this room for hours, watching one alien noble after another walk up those steps and try to get it. So far, there had been 17. The crown flashed bright red every time and threw them back like they had touched a live wire. Some of them didn't get back up. The aliens seemed to think it was funny. Jake's translator chip said they were laughing, but to him it sounded more like gears grinding. "Bring the human forward," said Lord Garrett. He was the High Chancellor, or whatever they called it, and he was in charge here. Jake's translator made it sound like he was ordering lunch instead of deciding someone's fate. Let's see what happens when something so low tries to touch something so high. The crowd made more of those annoying laughing sounds. Jake felt the guards push him hard from behind. He tripped and his legs shook. He was weak after 2 months of bad food and a small cell. He almost fell on the first step. The crown was hanging in front of him, and he could feel some kind of power in his chest. It was beautiful in a way that made him feel uneasy, like seeing a storm coming across the ocean. He could see patterns moving inside the silver light up close, like circuits or maybe veins. Jake's hands were shaking. Not exactly because they were scared, but there was a lot of that. More from being tired. Because I'm hungry. Because he knew that 6 other people from his squadron were waiting in the cells below to see if they would ever get out of this place alive. Jake thought, just touch it and get thrown back like the others. Then they might get bored and put me back in my cell. They might forget about us for a while. He raised his hand. The chains shook. His fingers looked thin and dirty next to the silver lighted crown. He stopped for a second. This felt different from watching the aliens try. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something felt off, or maybe right. Then his fingertips touched the metal. The end of the world. That's how it felt. Anyway, there was white light everywhere, and it hurt even with his eyes closed. Jake felt the crown hit his head hard, and all of a sudden he wasn't in the throne room anymore. He was falling through darkness that was somehow full of light, falling through memories that weren't his but felt more real than his own life. He saw boats, not the clunky military ships people use now, but beautiful ships that moved through space like dolphins. He saw cities that made the tallest buildings on Earth look like toys for kids. He saw millions of people building, creating, and exploring across more stars than he could count. He also heard voices. There were so many voices, all talking at once, and saying the same thing over and over. Human, human, human. Jake's body hit the throne, and he couldn't stop it from moving. He was shaking and convulsing, and his back was bent. He was holding on to the armrest so tightly that he thought his fingers might break. The crown was burning on his head, but not with heat. It was something else, something that felt like a mix of electricity, memory, and knowledge. He could hear the aliens screaming from far away. The clicking sounds had become a mess. But he couldn't think about that because his mind was being torn apart and filled with things he had never known before, things that no one alive had known for longer than he could understand. Then, without a doubt, a woman's voice spoke to him inside his head, cutting through all the noise, light, and pain. She sounded kind but also sad, like someone who had been waiting too long for something important. Finally, she said, "One of our kids is back." The throne room had gone completely crazy around Jake. The crystal pillars were glowing and pulsing in time with the crown. Machinery built into the walls, machinery that hadn't worked in a long time, suddenly roared to life. The lights came on. The panels opened. The whole palace was waking up as if it had been asleep for a long time. People were ignoring Lord Garrett's shouts. Half of the aliens were trying to get away. The other half were frozen in place, looking at Jake like he had turned into a monster. Jake understood something that made his blood run cold, even though he was in pain and the light was still filling his vision. The crown didn't pick him by chance. It didn't just pick him out of the prison cells at random for fun. It had been waiting. It had been waiting for this moment for hundreds of years, when it would reject every alien that touched it, waiting for a person. At that moment, the knowledge flowed through him, either from the crown or from somewhere deeper. People made this thing. Not the people who are alive now, but their ancestors from a long time ago, when it seemed like a fairy tale. 50,000 years ago, before the wheel was even invented on Earth, people ruled half of the galaxy. They had made the crown. They had built these castles. They had built an empire that covered more stars than Jake could count. Then they fell, gone, have been forgotten. The aliens, who called themselves the Valtor Empire, had built their entire civilization on top of the ruins of human civilization. They had found technology made by people and acted like it was theirs. They found the crown and used it to control their people, not knowing that it was waiting for its true masters to return. Jake tried to talk and tell him what he saw, but his throat wouldn't let him. The crown pushed down harder, and more memories came back. He saw the woman who had talked to him. The aliens had called her Queen Victoria, but now he knew what was true. She was part human. The Valtor had never known this, but somewhere in her DNA, human DNA had survived. That's why the crown picked her. And when she tried to use her power to help the human prisoners who were spread out across the empire, they killed her, gave her poison, made it seem like natural causes. Jake wasn't the only one who was angry at that moment. It came from the crown, from the memories of every human ruler who had worn it, and from the voice of that ancient civilization calling out across 50,000 years of silence. He opened his eyes wide. He could still see the white light, but now he could see through it. He could see Lord Garrett backing away, and for the first time, fear was clear on his alien face. He could see the guards pointing their guns at him but not firing, which made him unsure what to do. He could see the crowd splitting like water, trying to get away from what he had become. Jake got up slowly. The chains on his wrists broke like paper. The crown sat on his head, no longer separate but part of him now. Fused his skull in a way he knew would never come undone. His voice was so strong that it echoed to the throne room, making the crystal pillars ring like bells. He said, "I am Jake Miller from Earth, and I'm going home." Jake opened his eyes to a softness that he had almost forgotten about. Compared to a hard metal slab in his cell, the bed underneath him felt like sleeping on a cloud. He thought for a second that maybe it had all been a dream. Maybe he was somehow back on Earth, in his own apartment, before everything went wrong. He knew it was all real when his head started to hurt, like someone was using it as a drum. He put his hand on his forehead, expecting to feel the heavy weight of the crown. Instead, his fingers felt something smooth and thin, like a metal headband that had somehow become part of his skin. It pulsed softly, in time with his heartbeat. When he tried to pull away, pain shot through his head so quickly that he gasped and let go. "You're awake." "That's great." Jake turned his head toward the voice, but then he wished he hadn't when the room started to spin. There was an alien by the window, but it wasn't like the warriors who had brought him to the throne room. This one was older, smaller, and had gray spots all over its shell-like body. He looked tired in a way that made it clear he needed more than just sleep. "My name is Walter," the alien said. Jake's translator made his voice sound tired, like a teacher who had been working too long. "I worked for Queen Victoria before she died. I guess I work for you now. But I don't think it will be for long." Jake tried to sit up, and he was able to do it on the second try. The room was big and had windows that looked out over a city full of towers and lights. "I don't want anyone to serve me," he said. His throat hurt like sandpaper. "Just take this thing off my head and let me go back to my cell." "I can't do that." "No one can." Walter moved away from the window, slowly and carefully. "The crown picks, and when it picks, it bonds. You will die if you try to take it off by force. If you don't wear it and try to run, you'll die. You'll die if you say you won't rule." He stopped. "The crown doesn't give you a choice, boy. It just gives you a part to play until you can't play it anymore." "Great," Jake said quietly. So I have to wear jewelry from aliens that want to kill me. The perfect end to a perfect day. You need to know something else. Walter's voice got lower. Something the council doesn't want you to know. I probably shouldn't tell you this because it could get me killed, but I don't care anymore. He touched something on his wrist, and all of a sudden, the air was full of pictures. They moved through the room like light ghosts. Star maps that show hundreds of worlds. Pictures of buildings that look both old and new at the same time. Jake couldn't read the writing on the records, but he felt like he should know what they were about. The crown was made by humans, Walter said, and Jake's attention snapped back to him. Not people from now. People from 50,000 years ago, when your people ruled half of this galaxy. Jake looked at him. That's not possible. People lived in caves 50,000 years ago. We didn't even know how to farm yet. Maybe on Earth, but not in space. When Walter moved his hand, the pictures changed. There were ships that were sleek and beautiful, nothing like the clunky ships people use now. Cities that made everything on Earth look like a toy. Long before you did this time, your ancestors reached the stars. They made an empire that covered more systems than I can count. And the Valtor, they built stations, weapons, and technologies that we still don't fully understand. Jake asked, even though he already knew the answer, we were your workers, your helpers, your servants. There was something in Walter's voice that might have been shame. We were the ones who were left behind when humanity fell, and we still don't know why or how. We found your tools, your cities, and your technology. We figured out how to use them. We finally convinced ourselves that we had built them, that we were the rightful rulers of this galaxy. He stared straight at Jake, but the crown did remember. It has turned down every Valtor candidate for the past 300 years because it was waiting for a person to come back. Jake got up, wobbled, and caught himself on the bed. The pictures that were floating around him showed more now. People and aliens working together. People going to new places. People built things that looked like magic, but were really just science that was so advanced that it looked that way. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Walter was quiet for a while. Because you're going to die soon. You were unconscious when the council met 3 hours ago. They are already making plans to kill you. They can't take the crown off, but they can make sure the person who is wearing it gets hurt, falls down a few steps. He chokes on his food, gets sick from something that can't be found. He got closer. I wanted you to know the truth before that happens. Not just about the crown, but about your people. What about them? There are 40,000 people locked up in this empire right now. Possibly more. We've been taking your people for a long time. For hundreds of years. We use them to mine on worlds that are too dangerous for Valtor. We make them fight in arenas for fun. We keep them in labs so we can do experiments on them. Walter's translator heard something in his voice that sounded like disgust. Queen Victoria worked her whole life to set them free. She was aware that people had made the crown. She thought that one day it would pick a person again, and that person could finish what she had started. Even though the room was warm, Jake felt cold. Did they kill her? The council. Poison in her food. Made it seem real. She was the last good leader we had. Walter looked back out the window. Your people are spread out over many worlds. They work until they die, and then we get more. The council has kept it a secret. But now that you have the crown, you could let them go. You have the power to close down the prison camps, the arenas, and everything else. That's why they want to kill me. That's why you'll be dead by the end of the week if you don't watch out. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the strange city below. There were thousands of people stuck down there or on other worlds, doing work, pain, waiting for help that never came. The crown throbbed against his head, and all of a sudden he could feel something. Not thoughts, but feelings. It was like the crown was pointing out where things were. He could feel the palace systems, the security networks, and the ships in space. Everything was somehow connected, and everything reacted to the thing that was stuck to his head. Jake said quietly, I have 6 people from my squad in the cells. The council said they would kill them if I didn't help. Walter said, they will anyway. There's no point in keeping them alive after you're dead. Jake's hands turned into fists. Then I guess I shouldn't die. That's easier said than done, kid. The council has money. Killers. Poisons. Ways to make people go away that. Jake, the crown is showing me things, he said. He shut his eyes, and the feelings got stronger. I can see the systems in the palace. The locks on the doors. The guns. The boats. He opened his eyes and saw Walter. Victoria knew how to do this, right? She could control Valtor technology because it was based on designs made by people. Walter nodded slowly. She was careful with it. She never told the council how much power she really had. But yes, at the end, she could lock down whole parts of the palace just by thinking about it. Okay. Jake felt something settling in his chest. Not bravery, but more like anger and determination. Let the council know I want to meet with them. Tell them I'll do what they want and be their little king. But first, I want everyone in this city who is a prisoner to be set free. Today, they'll never agree to that. Then tell them that if they don't, I'll use the crown to lock every door, weapon, and ship in this palace. My people need to be free before anything will work. Jake turned all the way around to face Walter. Is that okay with me? Walter looked at him for a long time. Queen Victoria could. If the crown is really connected with you and is letting you use its systems, then yes, you could shut down the whole palace, and they wouldn't be able to stop you. That's what I'll tell them then. If you threaten them like that, they'll try to kill you faster. They're already trying to kill me. Jake walked toward the door, and his legs were steadier now. Make it worth their time, I guess. And what about Walter? Thank you for being honest with me. Most people wouldn't. The old alien made a noise that could have been a laugh. I'm too tired to watch another good person die for trying to do the right thing. And I'm too old to lie anymore. Queen Victoria would have liked you, Jake Miller. If she were here, she would have said you had spine. Jake said, I hope I keep that spine long enough to help someone. Then he opened the door and stepped out into a palace that wanted him dead. He was wearing a crown that wouldn't let him leave, and he was carrying the weight of 40,000 people who needed saving. Walter watched through the window behind him and thought about a queen who had died, trying to make things better, and a young human pilot who might be stubborn enough to finish what she had started. After wearing the crown for 3 weeks, Jake thought he had seen everything that was wrong with the Valtor Empire. He was wrong. The archive room was cold because it was deep inside the palace where few people went. Jake sat at a table that was covered in dust and watched holograms float around him in the air. Lisa Chun, the navigator from his squadron, and the only one who had studied alien biology back on Earth, sat next to him. Walter had secretly brought them here and showed them files he had kept hidden for years. Lisa's face had turned white as she looked through another record. Her hands were shaking. Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not just holding people captive. They're tearing us apart. Jake's stomach turned. What do you mean? She brought up a picture, and he wished she hadn't. It showed a hospital that was clean and bright, the kind of place that should have been helping people. There were tables with restraints instead, tubes and wires on machines. And there were a lot of people connected to machines that Jake didn't know, but knew were bad. The Valtor live a long time, Lisa said, her voice shaking. Some members of their council have been alive for hundreds of years. I couldn't figure out how to do it. Their biology shouldn't let it happen. She brought up more files, including medical records that Jake didn't understand. They've been taking neural patterns from other species, taking the parts of the brain that are in charge of memory, learning, and adapting. Then they put it into their own systems. It makes them live longer, makes them smarter, stronger. Are they taking parts of people's brains? Jake felt sick. Worse. They are copying patterns of consciousness. The person stays alive, but they're never the same again. Nothing. Broken. Lisa's voice broke. And humans are the species that works best with them. The transfer is almost perfect because our brains work in a way that is very similar to theirs. Jake got up so quickly that his chair fell over. The crown throbbed hard against his head, as if it were angry too. He saw a lot of pictures in his head, memories that weren't his. The crown was showing him things it had saved, one facility after another. Over the years, thousands of people have died. Some of them he knew from his own time. People who had gone missing from colonies and everyone thought were dead. How many? He asked. The files show 40,000 current prisoners across the Empire, but the records aren't complete. Places where information has been deleted. Lisa looked at him with tears in her eyes. Jake, there could be tens of thousands more who just disappeared. No records, no graves, just gone. The Crown showed him more. Not just pictures, but also understanding. It had been keeping track of everything for hundreds of years. All crimes, every person who was taken, every life is ruined. It had been waiting for someone to finally be able to stop it. Can you stop it? Lisa asked, as if she could read his mind. Jake closed his eyes and felt the Crown digging deeper into his mind. It was linking up with systems all over the palace, the world, and the whole Empire. Valtor had stolen and copied designs from humans to make all of their technology. The Crown could see everything. Boats, guns, systems for security. Yeah, he said quietly. Prison facilities. I think I can. But as soon as I try, the Council is going to go after me hard. This is our only chance. Just one. Lisa wiped her eyes and said, Then we better not waste it. They made plans all night long. Walter helped by bringing up plans for every facility, prison, and secret lab where people were being held. The Crown also helped by showing Jake how to get into the Empire's communication networks, how to broadcast on all channels at once, and how to get around the security systems that kept the facilities locked down. Jake was the only one in the throne room. When everything was ready, the palace was quiet and late. The Crown felt heavier than usual, or maybe it was just the weight of what he was about to do. He took a deep breath and let the Crown link him to everything at once. His voice was heard on all of the Valtor systems at once. All of the Empire's screens, speakers, and communication devices suddenly showed his face. The Crown showed him pictures from the files Walter had given him. The buildings, the steps, the bodies and graves without names. My name is Jake Miller, he said. He sounded calm, but he was scared inside. I wear the crown that you all say picture leaders. For 300 years, you've been telling yourself that you're civilized, that you're better than other kinds of life, that you have the power to rule this galaxy. He let the pictures keep going. People tied to tables. Valtor doctors taking out nerve tissue. You're not civilized. Children taken from colony worlds. You were made to kill. You are based on slavery. You steal the lives and minds of people you think are below you. Jake felt the crown beat faster, giving him more power. Right now, at this very moment, all human prisoners are free. All of the facilities are closed. The last harvesting operation is over. Anyone in charge who tries to stop this will be held accountable for crimes against living things. The answer came right away. The palace's alarm started going off. Jake could tell that the council members were in a panic, trying to stop his broadcast and go against the Crown's orders. But the Crown was quicker. It kept them from getting into their own systems. The hallways were filled with the sound of heavy footsteps. Lord Garrett himself was coming, and he was bringing guards in full battle gear with him. At least 20 of them burst into the throne room, weapons ready and charged. You've made a fatal mistake, human, Garrett said. His translator made him sound almost happy. Kill him, guards. The soldiers pointed their guns at them, weapons that could turn a person into ash. Jake noticed that their fingers were getting tighter on the triggers. He stayed still. The crown just reached out. The weapons broke apart. It didn't blow up. Instead, it broke apart piece by piece, with parts floating in the air as if they had never been connected. The guards looked at their empty hands, and then at the pieces of their guns that were floating in the air. Jake said softly, "You forgot something. My ancestors made your weapons. People made the technology you've been using 50,000 years ago. The Crown is aware of every design, system, and piece of equipment in this empire, and I can control everything." He didn't move his hands or make any gestures. But prison doors opened all over the capital city. The electronic locks didn't work. Force fields stopped working. People who had been stuck in cells for years on a dozen different worlds started to walk out of them. Next, the guards' armor locked up. They couldn't move. They were stuck like statues. Lord Garrett tried to run, but the door closed before he could get to it. "You're declaring war on the whole empire," Garrett said, his voice finally showing fear. "No," Jake said. "I'm putting an end to a war that your empire started. The question is whether you are smart enough to give up or dumb enough to keep fighting." Jake kept shutting down systems all over the palace. But not everything. He kept the basic life support and other important services running. He wasn't a murderer. He only wanted his people to be free. Lisa ran into the throne room, out of breath. "Jake, it's working. The buildings are going dark. But we're hearing that some members of the council are trying to start things up again. They're getting their own fleets ready." "Let them try," Jake said. The Crown told him where every ship, weapon, and resource the council had was. They're about to find out what happens when you build an empire on stolen tech, and the people who made it come back. Walter stood in the doorway, looking more alive than Jake had ever seen him. "Other species are sending messages. The ones that the Valtor took over. They want to know if this broadcast is real. Are you really freeing the prisoners?" Jake said, "Say yes to them. And tell them that now is the time to speak up if they want their own people to be free. The Valtor Empire has lost control of its own systems. This is the time for revolution." There was chaos in the city outside. Some of the Valtor were trying to get away. Some people were trying to bring back order. But for the first time in years, people were free to walk around on worlds Jake had never seen before. Other species also started to rise up when they saw what was possible. Jake stood on the throne with the crown on his head, which looked like a star. He knew he couldn't go back now. He had just begun a war. But maybe, just maybe, it was a war that had to happen. The fight, that would change everything was about to start. Jake was on the bridge of the Defiance, a warship that shouldn't have been built. The Crown had found blueprints for human ships that were buried in old databases. These ships were made 50,000 years ago. They had worked around the clock for 3 weeks to build it, sleek and deadly, with armor that could take hits from weapons that didn't exist when Earth thought it was the only planet in the universe. There were a lot of ships in space through the viewport. There might be more than 2,000 of them. They called it the Liberation Fleet. There were ships from 40 other species, as well as people from the freed prison colonies, aliens who the Valtor had conquered and who had been waiting for someone to finally say enough. "Contacts incoming," Riley Thompson said from the tactical station. When they were just fighter pilots protecting cargo runs, she was Jake's co-pilot. She was now in charge of an entire fleet, 3,000 ships. The people who support Valtor. General Hayes is in charge of their advance group. Jake felt the crown pulse against his head, and all of a sudden he was more aware. He could see every ship in both fleets, but not with his eyes. He could feel their weapons charging, hear the hum of their reactors, and know which ones were ready to fight, and which ones were having mechanical problems. The crown was showing him everything, but it was also showing him what was below. The Earth. The real Earth, not a colony or outpost, is where humans first lived. There was some kind of energy barrier over the whole planet, a dome of force that had been there for so long that it looked almost natural. "Walter," Jake said softly. The old Valtor advisor stood next to him, looking smaller in his plain robes. "You said Earth was gone, that all humans died out except for those on the colonies. The Valtor government said that, what most of us thought, but the Crown is showing me something else." Jake pointed to the planet below. "There are people down there. A lot of them. The Crown is taking over cities, farms, and roads. They're alive." Walter moved closer to the window so that his old eyes could see what Jake could see. "That's not possible. Earth had been sealed for 50,000 years. "I know. The Crown is telling me." Jake felt a hot, tight anger building in his chest. They're living like it's the Middle Ages down there. There's no power, no tech, no memory of going to space or other worlds. The Valtor kept them in cages like animals in a zoo. "A reserve population," Walter said in a soft voice. Victoria found it close to the end. She found documents in the deep archives that the Council thought they had thrown away. The Valtor kept Earth closed off and basic, so they would always have a place to get humans for the harvesting facilities. If the colonies ever ran out, They could just get more from Earth without anyone knowing. Jake's knuckles turned white because he was holding onto the railing so tightly. 9 billion people. They lived, grew up, and died without ever knowing they were prisoners on their own planet. They never knew that their ancestors had walked between stars. People on colony worlds were fighting to stay alive, but they never knew that. Earth was kept like a backup supply. They imprisoned an entire world for 50,000 years, Jake said, his voice barely under control. Yes, and when Victoria tried to free them, they poisoned her food. Walter looked worn out and old. I'm sorry, kid. I should have told you sooner. But I wasn't sure the Crown had given you full access to the historical files. I wanted to make sure. It doesn't matter now, Jake said as he stood up. We're going to finish what she started. Today, the fleet of the enemy was getting closer. The tactical display showed them spreading out and getting ready to attack. There were 3,000 ships against 2,000. Not good odds, and everyone on the bridge knew it. All ships battle formation, Riley yelled. Her voice reached every ship in the Liberation fleet. Stay close. Keep an eye on your wingmen. We practiced for this. First, the Valtor shot. Light beams shot across space, as bright as lightning. The Liberation fleet fired back, and all of a sudden, the viewport was full of light and explosions. Ships moved around and dodged. Some got hit and fell back, leaving behind a trail of air. Others kept going, their guns blazing. Jake saw everything through the Crown's enhanced vision. He could feel every hit, every close call, and every ship that was having a hard time staying alive. Riley was doing a great job of organizing their troops and moving ships around like chess pieces. She had spent weeks going over old Valtor battle records to learn how they fought. But that wasn't enough. The Loyalists had more ships, better weapons, and crews that had been fighting together for years. The Liberation fleet started to lose ground slowly, piece by piece. There were explosions on ships. Some people also retreated because they were too hurt to keep fighting. The left side was falling apart. Jake. Lisa called from the sensor station. She looked afraid. We're losing the left side. If they get through there, they'll divide our fleet in half. We won't be able to keep them. I know. Jake shut his eyes and let the crown get deeper into his head. It hurt, like someone pushing on a bruise, but he kept going. Walter, when Victoria was looking into Earth, did she learn anything about defense systems? Anything like weapons platforms, orbital guns, or something like that? She thought there might be something there. The energy shield around Earth is too complex to be just a wall. She thought that maybe the ancient people left defenses behind that were hidden under the shield. Walter shook his head. But she died before she could say for sure. The files weren't all there. The Crown knows. Jake could feel it now. A lot of information was coming into his head. Pictures of huge weapons platforms buried in orbit around Earth, where they have been for longer than most civilizations have been around. The ancient human empire put them there when Earth was the capital of half the galaxy. Defense systems to keep the homeworld safe from any danger. They had been asleep for 50,000 years, waiting for the right command code. Riley asked, "Can you wake them up?" Only a human wearing the crown could give this code. She had left the tactical station and was now standing next to him. "Jake, can you turn them on?" "Maybe, but I don't know what's going to happen. These systems are older than anything we've ever seen. If they break down and start firing on everything in orbit, then we die fighting instead of running." Walter said firmly, "Do it, boy." Victoria would have taken a chance. Jake nodded slowly. He used his mind to reach out and feel for the sleeping defense platforms through the crown. There, buried under the energy shield and out of sight in Earth's orbital space. 100 weapon systems, each strong enough to wipe out a fleet. He found the order in which the crown's memory banks could be turned on. The crown translated an old code that had been written in a language that had been dead for thousands of years. He only needed to send the order. Just had to cross their fingers that these old machines still worked. Hope they saw him as a person with the power to wake them up. "Everyone hold on," Jake said. Then he gave the order. Nothing happened for a while. The fight went on around them, with ships blowing up and beams of energy crossing the empty space. Jake wondered if the platforms were too old or too broken, or if they wouldn't. The energy shield around Earth flickered, like a light bulb that was about to go out. Then it broke into pieces, each one pulling back like petals on a flower that was opening. And below the shield, the defense platforms rose from orbits where they had been waiting in silence for longer than recorded history. They were huge. Each one was the size of a city block, and was covered in weapons that looked like works of art. The curves and angles hurt to look at. They moved smoothly, as if they had just been turned on instead of 50,000 years ago. Jake could feel them connecting to the crown, waiting for orders from whoever were the power of the ancient human empire. He could feel their power through the crown. Their targeting systems immediately locked onto a fleet of Valtor loyalists. 3,000 ships, all of which were seen as threats and marked for destruction. "Fire," Jake said softly. The platform shot. The fight was over in 4 minutes. The weapons that ancient people made didn't just sink ships. They erased them. Energy beams that made the Valtor weapons look like flashlights. Missiles that moved faster than people thought. In a matter of seconds, hundreds of enemy ships just disappeared. The rest tried to get away, but the platforms were faster. They chased down every ship that didn't give up and every ship that tried to get away. After it was over, space was full of trash and escape pods. The fleet of Valtor loyalists was gone. Just gone. And the Liberation fleet was still there, with its crew staring in shock at what had just happened. Jake felt his knees. His nose bled and dripped onto the deck. The crown felt like it was burning into his head. Waking up systems that old with that much power must have cost him something. He could feel it. Riley stopped him before he fell. "Jake? Stay with US, Jake. We did it. Do you hear me? We won." "The shield," Jake mumbled. His eyesight was bad, opening the shield. It was true. The energy barrier around Earth was breaking down because the defense platforms were working. For the first time in 50,000 years, people could see Earth from space. You could see cities on the surface, roads, land for farming. People who didn't know what had just happened above their heads. "They're hailing us," Lisa said from her desk. Her voice was shaky. "Signals from Earth. Many sources. They're asking who we are. Are we the ones their legends talked about?" "What legends?" "Children who walk between stars," Walter said quietly. "Every culture on Earth has its own version of it. Stories about people who went to the sky and promised to come back one day." He looked at Jake with a look of respect. "They've been waiting for 50,000 years. And now you're here." Jake tried to answer, but the world was spinning. He had too much power. The crown had told him not to, but he did it anyway. He felt his mind slipping away, like a wave of darkness. Riley's voice, strong and sure, was the last thing he heard before he passed out. "Tell them the children of Earth have come home. Let them know that we're here to stay." Jake stood in ruins that used to be something important 2 months after the battle. The locals called the area sacred ground, and the broken columns and crumbling walls stretched across it. They didn't know that it used to be Washington, D.C., the capital of an ancient country on Earth. 50,000 years ago, when the shield went up and locked people away from the stars, that history was lost. People here now just thought of it as a holy place where the oldest stone stood and where their grandparents' grandparents had been buried for generations. The shield coming down showed more than just a planet with people on it. It had revealed pieces of the original civilization that had somehow lived through all those thousands of years. People on Earth lived simple lives now. They grew crops, caught fish, and built things out of wood and stone. But they remembered their oldest songs. They sang about kids who had gone to walk among the stars and promised to come back one day. They had been waiting for 50,000 years. Jake was here now, and he didn't know what to do about it. It's strange, isn't it? Lisa walked up next to him, and her boots made a crunching sound on the old concrete that was now more dust than stone. The new coalition government was setting up its headquarters behind them, not in the empire that had enslaved so many, not on some Valtor world. This is where people first lived on Earth, being a legend to someone, being the person they've been singing about for a long time. "I don't want to be famous," Jake said in a low voice. The crown thumped against his head, in a familiar way that he had gotten used to over the weeks. I only wanted to save my crew. I'm supposed to be a hero now, according to some prophecy. You did save your crew, and about 40,000 other people, too. Lisa watched the construction happening far away. Ships from many different kinds of animals were landing, bringing people and goods. The Kelter had been slaves for hundreds of years. The Prax, whose worlds had been mined. Some Valtor even turned against their own government. Now they are all working together. That's worth something. Jake touched the crown. It had been talking to him more often, not with words, but with feelings, impressions, and pictures. He said, "It's been showing me stuff, pointing out things he wasn't sure he wanted to see. The crown. Things it can do besides controlling technology. What kinds of things? It can change the person who wears it, make them stronger, smarter, and faster. It can make you live forever. Some of the old kings wore it for hundreds of years and never got older." Jake's hands clenched. "It's giving me all of that. Not dying. Access to technologies that could rebuild the human empire in a few years instead of hundreds of years. The most power over every system in the galaxy." Lisa was silent for a while. The Valtor lords wanted that. That's why they kept trying to get the crown to pick them. Yeah. Jake felt cold even though the sun was shining. And I can't stop thinking about what Walter said, about why the first human empire fell apart. He took out a datapad and opened files that the crown had shown him. Records from 50,000 years ago, when people ruled half of the galaxy. We became victors, Lisa. The first people wanted to explore and meet other species on equal terms. But over time, from one generation to the next, we changed. We began to think we were smarter than everyone else. We enslaved other species for their own good. We told ourselves we were helping them, making them more civilized, and bringing them into our empire because it was the right thing to do. That sounds familiar, Lisa said in a dark voice. That's what the Valtor did. That's exactly what they did. Jake looked at the datapad and saw pictures of ancient rulers wearing the crown and making decisions that affected billions of people. They had the power to control everything because of the crown, and they used it. They thought they were being nice, but all they did was take away other people's choices. Lisa sat down on a broken pillar and thought. So the crown waited. For all those years of turning down Valtor candidates, it was waiting for a human who had learned from that mistake. Someone who knew what empire really meant. Maybe. Jake watched as Riley Thompson told a group of workers below what to do. She was in charge of the relief efforts, making sure that Earth's people got food and medicine without being overwhelmed by all the aliens that were suddenly appearing. She was good at it, better than Jake would have been. Walter was talking to people from a dozen different species next to her. He was helping them figure out how to make a government that didn't put one person or species in charge of everyone else. "I've been thinking," Jake said slowly. "The crown was meant to bring the galaxy together, right? It was meant to keep things in order and make sure that someone was in charge who could make the big decisions. That was a plan. But maybe the crown was always the problem. Corruption might come from having one person in charge, one ruler who can overrule everyone else. People don't get corrupt when they have power. They get corrupt when they have power over other people." Lisa gave him a sharp look. "What are you going to do, Jake?" He smiled, but it wasn't a smile that made him happy. Something dumb. If Queen Victoria had lived long enough to see how her empire really worked, she probably would have done this. Jake called a meeting 3 days later. Representatives from every species in the new coalition came. The big hall they built could barely fit everyone. People from Earth and the colonies that were freed. Kelter has 3 eyes and skin that looks like scales. Prax, who look like plants that could walk. More than, who had to wear special suits and breathe methane. Even Valtor, the ones who had turned against their own empire and helped free it. Riley, Lisa, and the rest of Jake's old squadron were with him. Walter was in the front row, and his old eyes were watching closely. Jake was in the middle, and everyone could see the crown on his head, which was pulsing with the steady silver light that everyone was used to seeing. "For 50,000 years, he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "this crown has been a sign of ultimate power. Whoever wore could control technology, make decisions that affected the lives of billions of people, and go against anyone else's choice. It picked leaders. It kept its power. It kept the cycle going. He stopped and looked around at all the different faces, both human and alien. The people who built it long ago became tyrants. They thought they were helping, but they were really just in charge. The Valtor then took over and did the same thing. People with power kept using it to control everyone else. Ambassador Carol Phillips, who spoke for Earth's temporary government, asked, "What are you saying?" She looked worried. "I'm saying that cycle ends today." Jake reached up and touched the crown. He could feel it fighting back against what he was about to do. It was aware. The crown taught me one last thing, something that the builders put in, hoping it wouldn't be needed, but knowing it might be. I can break it down, take it all apart, put all of its technology and knowledge into public databases that all species can use. No more final say. No more rulers who are chosen. Just information that everyone can see. The hall went crazy. A few people cheered. Some people yelled in protest. Jake's translator couldn't keep up with the alien delegates who were arguing with each other in different languages. One of the reformed Valtor representatives, Andrew Cole, got up. "You would give up living forever? You would give up the ability to change the galaxy however you want? For what?" Jake said firmly. "For the chance that we do better this time. No more empires. No more slaves. No one person or species should be able to decide what's best for everyone else. Just a group of equals working together, making mistakes, and figuring things out as we go." Riley moved forward. "And what if someone tries to make another empire? What if someone tries to take over everyone again, and the crown isn't there to stop them?" "Then you stop them," Jake said, looking at her and then at everyone else in the room. "All of you. All of us. That's the point. I just happen to be a pilot from Earth. I shouldn't have had this much power. No one should. Not me, not the Valtor Lords, not anyone." Walter got up slowly. Jake saw tears in the old Walter's alien eyes as he looked at him for a long time. Walter's voice shook as he said, "Queen Victoria will be proud. She worked hard all her life to make things better, and they killed her for it. But you're going to finish what she started." Jake nodded. Then he shut his eyes and asked the crown to show him how to die. The crown started to shine more and more. Jake felt its awareness touch his mind one last time, that ancient awareness that had been waiting and watching for so long. It felt like it was almost relieved. It whispered in his mind that you had learned. In the end, one of you learned. The crown broke. It didn't blow up in a big way. It turned into pure energy, a wave of light that spread out. Jake felt it leave him and the constant pressure on his head finally go away. The energy moved through the hall, the city, the planet, and beyond, moving through space faster than light, sending information to every system in the galaxy. Medical knowledge that could help people get better. Engineering methods that could make ships, homes, and lives better. Farming methods that could feed billions of people. Traveling faster than light that was safer and more effective. 50,000 years of knowledge that was shared with every civilization that could use it. Jake fell down. His legs gave out, and he fell hard to the ground. He was just a person again for the first time in months. A pilot who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Finally, the weight of ages was gone. 3 days later, he woke up in a hospital bed. Lisa and Riley were there. They both looked tired but happy. "It worked," Riley said quietly. "The information is spreading throughout the galaxy. 300 different civilizations have already started to share what they have found in return." "What's the coalition?" "They're calling it the Great Opening." Jake's voice was hoarse and his throat was dry. "Meeting every day. Honestly, I fight every day too." Lisa smiled and said, "Building a government without one ultimate ruler is a real mess. But at least it's true. At least everyone has a voice." Walter came by later. He brought news from all over the galaxy. The Valtor were being tried for their crimes. Earth was sending diplomats to reconnect with the human colonies that had been cut off from the rest of the world for generations. The other species were carefully and hopefully working together to build something new. It wasn't perfect. There were fights, arguments, and even a few small fights. But there were no empires, no slaves, no harvesting facilities. What will you do now? Walter asked. Jake looked out the window at the sky on Earth. Real sky, not one that is blocked by an energy shield. I think I want to go home. Look for a place that is quiet. Maybe teach kids history, so they know where they came from and what their ancestors did, both good and bad. Me? Walter laughed. I'm too old to quit working. I'll help put together this new, messy government of ours. Someone needs to tell them why we fight for everyone's voice to be heard instead of just making things work better. He stopped at the door. Jake, thanks for being brave enough to give up something that most people would kill for. Jake thought of a queen who had died trying to free the slaves. 5 years later, Jake was teaching history to kids who had never been in chains in a classroom on Earth. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went above the planet. The coalition wasn't perfect. There were still fights, disagreements, and problems to solve, but there were no empires, no rulers in the end, not one species being in charge of all the others. People, both human and non-human, are just trying to figure out how to get along. Riley came by that night with news of new discoveries. They had discovered more ancient human sites, more lost colonies, and more pieces of the puzzle that would help them understand what really happened 50,000 years ago. Do you want to come with us? She asked. We need someone who knows what we're looking for. Jake thought about it. He smiled after that. Maybe this summer. I have students who need to learn that power should help people, not control them. That the hardest thing in the world is to let go of control and let other people make their own decisions. He looked through his window at the stars. Someone needs to make sure we don't forget this lesson, so we don't have to learn it again for another 50,000 years. Riley laughed. That's fair. But Jake, you made the galaxy better. No, he said softly. It's better because of what we all did. That's the whole point. She left, and Jake went back to getting ready for the lesson the next day. The Earth turned outside, finally free under an open sky. And somewhere in the vastness of space, in the quantum patterns where energy turns into thought, the crown's last echo whispered across the stars. Well done. Good job.